If you love dramatic and suspenseful love stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a thrilling episode. The morning had started like any other, the sunlight creeping lazily through the blinds of Jameson Enterprises' towering glass office. Derek Jameson, the youngest CEO in the company's history, sat at his sleek mahogany desk, reviewing reports with a precision that only someone of his reputation could manage. At 29, he had everything he could have ever dreamed of: wealth, power, influence, but there was an emptiness he could not fill, a quiet longing he rarely admitted to anyone. It was during these silent moments of reflection that a knock on the door broke his concentration. "Come in," he said without looking up. The door opened, and in walked Emily Collins, the new intern, her petite frame carrying an air of cautious confidence. She was young, undeniably beautiful, and had a presence that somehow softened the sterile, cold air of the executive office. Derek had noticed her the first day she arrived, but he had never allowed himself to indulge in thoughts about her. After all, mixing business with personal desires was something he avoided like the plague. "Good morning, Mr. Jameson," Emily said, her voice steady but carrying a subtle warmth. She placed a stack of documents on his desk, neatly arranged, and gave him a polite smile. Derek looked up finally, noticing the faint glint of lipstick on her lips. For some reason, that small detail caught his attention. It was a mundane observation, yet it lingered in his mind longer than it should have. "Morning, Emily. How's your first week going?" he asked, attempting casual conversation, though he knew she was already performing beyond expectations. "It's going well, thank you. I'm learning a lot," she replied, her eyes flickering briefly to a folder she had just placed on his desk. There was a hint of nervous energy in her demeanor, something he couldn't quite place. Derek returned to his work, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Perhaps it was the way she glanced at him sometimes, or maybe it was his own imagination running wild in the quiet of the office. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. By late afternoon, the office had emptied significantly. Most employees had left, leaving only the senior staff and a few interns. Emily was still at her desk, meticulously organizing files and preparing presentations. Derek walked past her desk, ostensibly to check on something, but his gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. That's when he noticed it, the faint smear of lipstick on his own collar, which he hadn't remembered noticing before. His heart skipped a beat. That was impossible. How could there be lipstick on his collar? He hadn't been near anyone that could have done this. He looked around quickly, but the office was empty. His mind raced with possibilities, all equally improbable and alarming. "Emily," he called, his voice tighter than intended. She looked up, startled, and approached him immediately. "Do you know anything about this?" he asked, motioning vaguely to the collar of his shirt. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she seemed to hesitate. Then, with a calmness that belied the tension in the room, she said, "You don't remember last night?" The words hit him like a lightning bolt. Last night, his mind scrambled through the hours, trying to recall anything beyond the memory of leaving his office late, alone, after a long day. He couldn't remember meeting anyone. He couldn't remember her. "What are you talking about?" he asked, though the color had drained from his face. Emily bit her lower lip, a faint blush creeping across her cheeks. "I think you need to think really hard, Mr. Jameson. You were surprised, but I'm not sure how much you remember." Derek's pulse quickened. There was an undeniable tension in her words, a combination of teasing and something more serious, more intimate. His mind refused to process it all at once, juggling between denial, curiosity, and a growing awareness that last night's events might have been far more personal than professional. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to force clarity, but Emily's presence seemed to blur his thoughts even more. She stepped closer, carefully, deliberately, as if she were walking on the line between professional decorum and something else entirely. "I didn't want to bring it up in front of everyone," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper now. "But you left without saying anything, and now." Now he was staring at her, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the tension that filled the office. Derek felt an unfamiliar vulnerability, the kind he had not allowed himself to experience in years. Emily's gaze was steady, unwavering, almost challenging him to confront the truth of what had happened. For a moment, silence dominated the room. Then, almost instinctively, Derek reached up and touched his collar again, confirming what he had already seen. The lipstick mark was real, undeniable. His mind raced, trying to reconstruct the night, but the pieces refused to fall into place. Emily, sensing his internal struggle, offered a small, enigmatic smile. "It's okay," she said. "You'll remember. Eventually." Derek exhaled slowly, realizing that whatever had happened, it was far from over. The lipstick on his collar was more than a mark, it was a message, a memory waiting to be uncovered. And as he looked into Emily's eyes, he understood that this was only the beginning. Whatever night they had shared had changed something fundamental, something neither of them could ignore. As the office lights dimmed with the setting sun, Derek felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. The mystery of last night, of Emily, and of the undeniable attraction that now hung in the air was only starting to unravel. One thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same between them again. And somewhere deep inside, he realized he wanted it to be that way. The next morning, Derek woke with a tight knot in his chest and a sense of unease he couldn't shake. The events of the previous evening were still a haze, fragments of memory, fleeting images, and that inexplicable moment with Emily. He dressed carefully, straightened his tie, and made his way to the office, trying to ignore the subtle tension that hummed beneath his skin. Yet, the moment he entered the lobby of Jameson Enterprises, his mind went straight to her. Emily was already at her desk, neatly arranging files, but this time there was a softness in her movements, a quiet energy that contrasted with the professional poise she always maintained. When she looked up and met his gaze, there was a spark, a silent acknowledgement of the night neither of them had fully addressed. Derek felt a shiver run down his spine. He tried to focus on his schedule, on the meetings he had planned, but the lipstick on his collar from yesterday refused to leave his thoughts. It was during the mid-morning briefing that Emily finally approached him. She carried a folder, but the way she held it, with her fingers brushing against the edge of his hand as she passed it, made Derek's heart skip. "Mr. Jameson," she said softly, almost as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile tension in the room, "I think we need to talk about last night." He froze in place, gripping the edge of the conference table for support. Every instinct told him to remain professional, to deny curiosity, to walk away. Yet, every fiber of his being urged him to listen. He nodded subtly, and she led him down a quiet hallway away from the rest of the office. The hum of computers and low chatter faded behind them, leaving only the soft echo of their footsteps. Once they were alone, Emily turned, leaning against the wall, her arms crossed but relaxed. "You don't remember," she said quietly, almost teasing, but there was a seriousness underneath. "I can't tell you everything all at once. You need to recall it yourself." Derek ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of both curiosity and anxiety. "Emily, I swear, I don't remember anything beyond leaving my office yesterday evening." "What exactly happened?" Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "You were surprised and a little reckless, but it wasn't all bad." Her eyes searched his, gauging his reaction. Derek's stomach tightened. The combination of her calm confidence and the mysterious tone in her voice made him acutely aware of the distance between what he remembered and what had occurred. She took a small step closer, and the scent of her perfume enveloped him, a delicate, intoxicating mix that made his pulse accelerate. "I can't just tell you. That would ruin the moment, don't you think?" she said, her voice a whisper now. Derek wanted to argue, to demand answers, but he found himself helpless under the gravity of her gaze. They stood in silence for a few heartbeats, the office hallway suddenly feeling impossibly small, intimate. Derek realized then that whatever had happened last night wasn't merely an accident or a mistake. Emily's presence, her calm confidence, and the unspoken connection between them hinted at something deeper, something neither of them could deny. Finally, Emily broke the tension. "You were bold, maybe more than you intended." And yet, her voice trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished, yet loaded with meaning. Derek felt heat rise to his cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment, confusion, and undeniable desire. I don't understand," he muttered, trying to keep his composure. "Why can't you just tell me?" She shook her head, a faint laugh escaping her lips, light and melodic. "Because, Mr. Jameson, some moments are meant to be remembered, not explained. And I think this is one of them." Her eyes glinted mischievously, and Derek's mind raced with possibilities, none of which were entirely innocent. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaching made them both freeze. They straightened up quickly, pretending to be nothing more than colleagues passing in the hallway. Derek's heart was still pounding, his thoughts spinning, but he forced himself to focus on the casual act. Emily, however, shot him a small, secretive smile, one that promised more than words could convey. Throughout the day, Derek found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Every time he caught sight of Emily, whether it was her leaning over a desk, laughing softly with another intern, or walking past his office, he felt the memory of last night pressing against the edges of his mind. The lipstick on his collar wasn't just a mark, it was a reminder, a tease, a lingering shadow of something electrifying and dangerously intimate. By late afternoon, Derek couldn't take it any longer. He found Emily alone in the break room, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Emily," he began, his voice low, controlled, "we need to settle this. I can't stop thinking about last night, and I need to understand what happened." She looked up, holding his gaze steadily. "Are you sure you're ready to remember?" she asked, her tone both gentle and challenging. Derek swallowed hard. "I have to be. I need to know." For a moment, Emily seemed to weigh her words carefully. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped closer. "Last night, you were different. Not just bold, but vulnerable. You let your guard down in a way you never have before. And I couldn't resist it." Her confession hung in the air, raw and intimate. Derek's pulse quickened, a mix of shock, arousal, and fascination. He searched her eyes, desperate for more, but she offered only hints, teasing him with fragments of the memory. "You were playful, and you were reckless. You kissed me before you realized it, and somehow, it felt like it was meant to happen." Derek's mind whirled. He couldn't remember it, yet every word she spoke stirred something primal within him. The day ended with Derek leaving the office in a daze, his thoughts consumed by Emily. Her whispered words had ignited a curiosity and longing that he couldn't ignore. The mystery of last night, combined with the undeniable chemistry between them, made him realize that this was only the beginning. Whatever had started with a smear of lipstick on his collar was about to evolve into something far more intense, far more dangerous, and far more consuming. And as he drove home, the city lights blurring past, Derek made a silent promise to himself. He would uncover every detail of that night, piece by piece, and when he did, he wouldn't let it end. Derek couldn't sleep that night. The city outside his apartment glittered like a field of shattered stars, but inside, his thoughts were consumed entirely by Emily. Her words from earlier that day replayed over and over in his mind, playful, teasing, yet undeniably intimate. He knew he had to confront the truth of last night, no matter how disorienting or scandalous it might be. The lipstick mark on his collar wasn't just a stain, it was a challenge, a memory daring him to reclaim it. The next morning, Derek arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to catch Emily alone before the day's chaos swallowed them. The lobby was quiet, the hum of the elevators the only sound as he made his way to her desk. Emily looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face. "You're early," she said, her tone light, but her eyes betrayed an awareness of the tension that had been building between them. "I couldn't wait," Derek admitted, trying to keep his voice calm, professional, but failing entirely. "We need to talk. I need answers." Emily tilted her head, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Answers? I can give you some, but only if you're ready to face the truth." The way she said it sent a shiver down his spine. Her confidence, combined with the mystery of last night, made every nerve in his body alert. They walked together down a side corridor, away from prying eyes. Derek's mind raced, trying to reconstruct any fragments of memory. He remembered leaving the office late, tired and drained, but after that, nothing. Yet Emily's demeanor hinted at something wildly different. Her posture, the way she avoided meeting his eyes directly yet lingered near him, suggested she held pieces of a puzzle he had no recollection of. "Tell me," Derek said finally, his voice low and demanding. "Just tell me the truth. I need to remember." Emily's gaze softened, and for a moment, she seemed almost vulnerable. "Last night," she began carefully, "you were uninhibited. Everything you usually keep locked away, the charm, the arrogance, the desire, you let it out. And I couldn't resist." Her words were deliberate, meant to stir something within him, and they succeeded. Derek's pulse quickened as he tried to visualize what she described, his imagination filling in the blanks. You kissed me, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. It started as a joke. You tried to tease me, and I teased you back. But then, things escalated. You weren't holding back, and I wasn't either. Derek felt he'd crawl up his neck. His professional restraint clashed violently with the vivid image her words created. He wanted to deny it, to push it away, but every instinct told him otherwise. And the lipstick? He asked, his voice almost trembling. That wasn't an accident, was it? Emily laughed softly, a sound that was both playful and provocative. No, she admitted. It was a mark, a memory, something to remind you, and me, of what happened. She leaned slightly closer, so close that Derek could see the subtle blush on her cheeks, the way her eyes shone with mischief. It wasn't just about the kiss, Derek. It was about you letting go, even if only for a moment. The air between them felt charged, almost electric. Derek's mind raced. Part of him wanted to retreat, to restore the professional boundaries that had always defined their relationship. But another part, a deeper, darker part, wanted to dive headfirst into the chaos Emily represented. He had never experienced anything like this before, the thrill of the unknown, the allure of someone who could challenge him completely, yet so effortlessly. Emily took a step back, giving him space, but the tension lingered like a charged wire. You might not remember everything, she said softly, but that's okay. Some memories are more fun when they're rediscovered. Derek struggled to breathe normally. He was both infuriated and fascinated, caught between curiosity and desire, between control and surrender. Throughout the morning, Derek found himself stealing glances at Emily, replaying the fragments of conversation, the imagined moments, over and over. Every casual movement, every laugh, every glance from her seemed loaded with meaning, as if the night they had shared had left invisible threads connecting them. He realized then that this wasn't just a fleeting attraction, it was something more, something dangerous in its intensity. By lunchtime, Derek could no longer contain the growing tension. He found Emily in the quiet corner of the office cafeteria, pretending to organize papers while actually observing him subtly. He approached, his steps measured but purposeful. Emily, he said, his voice steady now, we can't keep pretending. Last night, whatever happened, it matters. To me. She looked up, her expression unreadable, a mix of amusement, challenge, and something tender. It does, she asked, almost teasing, but there was sincerity in her tone. Derek nodded. Yes, it does. And I need to remember. I need to understand what we, his words faltered, betraying the intensity of what he felt. Emily's lips curved into a slow smile. Then you'll have to earn it, she said, cryptic and playful. I can't just hand it to you. Memories, and moments, they need to be revisited, relived. Derek's heart pounded. She was deliberately making him wait, deliberately drawing him into the thrill of uncertainty, and he couldn't deny how exhilarating it felt. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Meetings, reports, and calls all became background noise to the tension that simmered between Derek and Emily. Every time their eyes met, a silent conversation passed between them, a mix of challenge, desire, and unspoken secrets. By evening, Derek realized that the night ahead might be just as revealing, just as intoxicating, as the night he couldn't remember. Finally, as the office emptied and the city lights outside began to shimmer in the dusk, Derek approached Emily one last time. I don't want to wait any longer, he said, his voice low but firm. I need to know everything. Emily's eyes sparkled, a mixture of delight and caution. Be careful what you wish for, Mr. Jameson, she whispered. Some memories are intoxicating, and some are dangerous. Are you ready to face both? Derek's jaw tightened. I am. And with that, the tension between them reached its peak. The night they had shared, the mystery of the lipstick, and the unspoken desire had all converged into a moment that neither of them could ignore. Derek realized then that this was only the beginning, an intense, dangerous, and passionate beginning that would change everything. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. Last night had been a spark, tonight would be the fire. The office had emptied long before Derek finally allowed himself to breathe. The city outside shimmered with golden lights reflecting off the glass skyscrapers, but inside, the quiet hum of computers and the faint scent of Emily's perfume lingered in the hallways, refusing to let him forget. He paced slowly, trying to organize his thoughts, trying to recall anything of last night. Fragments surfaced. laughter, the feel of her hand against his, a kiss that seemed impossible yet unforgettable. Yet, the details, the how, the when, the exact sequence of events, remained frustratingly elusive. He found Emily in the quiet lounge near the executive offices, sitting on a leather chair with her legs crossed, a stack of documents beside her. She looked up as he entered, her expression calm, unreadable, yet somehow inviting. "You're still thinking about it," she said softly, as if reading his mind. Derek nodded, unable to deny it. "I need to remember, Emily. I can't stop thinking about it, and the more I try to focus, the less I seem to recall." Emily set her documents aside, leaning slightly forward. Her eyes glimmered with a mixture of mischief and empathy. "Do you want me to help you remember?" she asked, her voice low, teasing, yet strangely serious. Derek felt his chest tighten. "Yes," he said almost immediately. "I need to know what happened last night." For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and lightly touched his arm, a brief, deliberate contact that made him shiver. "Last night," she began, started innocently enough. "You were frustrated with the workload, stressed, and then you made that careless joke, the one about interns being too ambitious for their own good." Derek frowned, trying to recall, and felt a flicker of memory, him, laughing, feeling the weight of responsibility lighten, and then, Emily laughing too. Her laughter had been soft, melodic, teasing. And then, Derek prompted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You noticed me," she said, leaning back slightly. "Really noticed me. Not just as an intern, but as someone different. You leaned over to point something out in the files, and our hands brushed." That was the first spark. Derek's mind raced. The contact had seemed trivial at the time, but she described it as the beginning, a trigger. His pulse quickened. Then things escalated quickly, she continued. "You were bold, more than you intended. You teased me, and I teased back. Then you leaned closer, closer than you should have, and the kiss happened." Derek's stomach twisted. The memory was still hazy, like smoke slipping through his fingers, but her words made it tangible, real. "It was impulsive," she said, smiling faintly. "But not a mistake. You were present, focused entirely on me for that moment. And I responded because, Derek, you're impossible to resist when you let yourself be vulnerable." Vulnerable. The word echoed in his mind. He had never been called that by anyone. Powerful, confident, untouchable, yes. Vulnerable, never. And yet, the way Emily said it, with understanding and admiration, made him feel something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Derek exhaled slowly. "And the lipstick?" he asked, unable to stop himself. His hands trembled slightly. Emily laughed softly, a delicate, teasing sound. "That was your doing, indirectly," she admitted. "You kissed me after brushing past me, and it left a mark. A mark that would remind you, eventually, of what happened. You wanted me to remember, and I wanted you to as well." She paused, her eyes locking with his. "It wasn't just about a kiss, Derek. It was about control, desire, and finally, letting go." Derek felt a heat rise in his body. The combination of her words and the image they painted made his head spin. He wanted to deny it, to retreat into professionalism, but every instinct, every cell in his body, urged him to lean in closer, to embrace the intensity of what she was revealing. Emily's gaze softened, becoming more intimate. "Do you want to know everything?" she asked, her voice dropping lower, almost a whisper. Derek nodded, his throat tight, heart racing. "Yes, every detail. I need to understand." She moved slightly closer, so close that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. "You were reckless," she said, her eyes glinting. "You laughed too loud, you kissed me too boldly, and at one point, you even tried to lift me onto your desk. I stopped you, of course, but the way you looked at me, the way your hand brushed mine, it was electric. It made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years." Derek's mind reeled. Images were forming in his memory, hazy but increasingly vivid. The smell of her perfume, the brush of her hair against his cheek, the rapid beat of her pulse matching his own. "And then," Emily continued, her voice softer, "you pulled away slightly, realizing what was happening, and yet you couldn't. There was a moment where we just stared at each other, both aware of how dangerous it could be, both aware of how much we wanted it anyway." She smiled faintly, a little mischievous, a little tender. "And that's when I left the mark on your collar. It wasn't just for you, it was for both of us." A reminder of what we allowed ourselves, even for a few stolen moments. Derek's hands trembled. His mind tried to catch up with the memory, the emotion, the unrelenting pull he felt toward her. The night wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was an awakening, a spark that threatened to consume everything he had carefully controlled in his life. And yet, he realized he didn't want it to stop. He leaned closer, his voice low, urgent. Emily, this changes everything. I don't want it to stop. I want to explore it, whatever it is between us. Emily's eyes shone, a mixture of excitement and caution. You're serious? She asked. You know this isn't just about desire. This is dangerous, risky. And yet, I've been waiting for you to say that. Derek felt a rush of exhilaration. I am serious. Whatever it takes, Emily. Last night was a start. And now we face it together. The tension between them was palpable. The office, once sterile and professional, now felt charged with electricity. They were no longer merely boss and intern. Last night had shifted the balance, creating a connection that was raw, intense, and impossible to ignore. Derek realized that he wanted more, not just the memory, but the experience, the thrill, the danger, the intimacy. As they stood there, in the fading light of the evening, Derek understood that their story was just beginning. The lipstick, the stolen kisses, the fragments of last night, all of it had set the stage for something far greater, far more consuming. And deep inside, he knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The following morning, Derek's thoughts were consumed by Emily. The memory of last night had begun to form fragments in his mind, fleeting images, touches, and moments that were as intoxicating as they were frustratingly incomplete. Every time he entered the office, every time he saw her across the room, his pulse quickened. There was an unspoken tension that hung between them, a dangerous electricity that neither of them dared to confront fully in public. Derek tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Files, reports, and endless meetings became background noise to the vivid, tantalizing memory of Emily's laughter, her teasing words, and the brush of her hand against his. He realized that last night had awakened something in him, something wild, untamed, and insistent. And he knew, with a clarity that both thrilled and terrified him, that he wanted more. Emily, for her part, carried herself with the same poised professionalism she always had, but Derek could sense a subtle shift. Her eyes often lingered on him a fraction longer than necessary, a fleeting smile that hinted at the memories they shared and the moments yet to come. She was no longer just the intern, she was a presence that unsettled him in ways he had never allowed himself to experience. By mid-afternoon, Derek could no longer resist the pull. He found her in the quiet corner of the office, away from prying eyes, pretending to review documents but clearly aware of his approach. He leaned against the wall, close enough for her to feel his presence. Emily, he said, his voice low, almost reverent, we can't keep skirting around this. I need to know everything that happened last night. I need to understand what I did, what we did, and why it felt inevitable. Emily looked up, her eyes locking with his, a mixture of mischief and seriousness. You're serious? She asked, her voice soft but loaded with meaning. Derek nodded, more serious than ever. I don't care about protocol, rules, or consequences. Last night, it matters to me. Every moment, every look, every touch. I need to remember it. For a moment, Emily didn't respond. She studied him, her gaze intense, weighing the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. All right, she said, but be warned, some memories are more dangerous than others. Derek's pulse quickened. I can handle it, he said firmly, though a shiver of anticipation ran down his spine. Emily's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Last night started with laughter, she began, her voice a soft whisper, vivid in his imagination. You were frustrated with work, yes, but also playful, teasing in a way that caught me off guard. You leaned over the desk, your hand brushed mine, and I felt something. Something I couldn't ignore. Derek closed his eyes briefly, letting the memory, or the reconstruction of it, wash over him. He could see the flicker of her expression, hear the soft laugh, feel the tension that had sparked between them. You kissed me, she continued, her voice dropping lower, almost intimate. And I kissed back. It wasn't planned. It wasn't thought out. It was raw, immediate. And when it happened, I realized that all the boundaries we thought existed, professional boundaries, rules, the careful walls you've built around yourself, didn't matter anymore. Derek swallowed hard, a heat spreading through his body. Every word she spoke felt like a spark, igniting memories that refused to stay hidden. And the rest? He asked, his voice barely audible. Emily hesitated, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. The rest, she said softly, was a blur of touches, laughter, and stolen glances. You were reckless, daring, and I couldn't resist. There was a moment when you leaned closer, almost daring me to respond. And I did. I responded fully. You don't remember that, do you? Derek shook his head. No, he admitted, a mixture of frustration and fascination in his voice. But I want to. I need to. Tell me everything. Her eyes softened, and she moved closer, their proximity now charged with a palpable tension. There was a moment when I thought we might get caught, she confessed. And yet, even with the risk, it felt inevitable. The way you looked at me, the way your hand lingered, it was impossible to ignore. And when it happened, the kiss, the closeness, it was perfect, despite the chaos. Derek's heart pounded. He had never felt this way before, not about anyone. Emily's presence, her voice, the memory of her touch, was consuming him. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to reclaim what had been stolen from his memory by his own foggy recollection. Yet, the professional boundaries and the risks of discovery loomed over them, making every heartbeat feel urgent, dangerous, and thrilling all at once. And the lipstick? Derek asked, his voice tense. Why did you leave it? Emily's lips curved into a teasing smile. It was a mark, she said softly, a reminder. Not just for you, but for me as well. A way to remember what we allowed ourselves, even for a few stolen moments. It wasn't about guilt or shame, it was about capturing the intensity of the night. Every kiss, every touch, every look, preserved in that small mark. Derek felt a shiver run through him. The lipstick was more than a stain, it was a symbol, a tangible proof of the passion and vulnerability they had shared. And now, with her words guiding his fragmented memory, the intensity of that night came rushing back in vivid waves. Emily studied him carefully, her gaze both intimate and challenging. You can't undo last night, Derek, she said softly, but you can embrace it. You can explore it, understand it, let it change you. Are you ready for that? Derek's jaw tightened. I am, he said firmly. I want it all, the risk, the thrill, the passion. I want to experience it with you, fully, without hesitation. A faint, victorious smile crossed Emily's face. Then let's see where this takes us, she whispered, and the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. For the first time, Derek realized that this wasn't just about a stolen night or a smear of lipstick. It was about something larger, something more intense, an awakening of desire, of connection, and of a bond that neither of them could ignore. As they stood there, in the fading light of the office, Derek understood that their story was far from over. Last night had been only the beginning, a spark that had ignited a fire now burning fiercely between them. And deep down, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The moment stretched, charged with anticipation, and Derek made a silent vow. He would embrace every memory, every touch, every stolen second with Emily. Whatever danger, consequence, or challenge awaited, he would not shy away. Last night had been the spark. Tonight, and every night after, would be the flame. The night after their charged conversation, Derek couldn't focus on anything else. The city lights outside his office window blurred as his mind replayed Emily's words, her laughter, the fleeting brush of her hand against his. The memory of her, the real, tangible presence of her, was more intoxicating than he had ever imagined anything could be. He had spent years controlling every aspect of his life, business decisions, social appearances, even his own emotions. But Emily had unlocked something inside him he didn't know existed, a longing that was dangerous, irresistible, and entirely consuming. By the time he arrived at the office the following morning, Derek already knew the day would be impossible to navigate professionally. Every glance, every movement of Emily's caught his attention. She carried herself as though nothing had changed, but he could see the subtle differences, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes occasionally lingered on him, the faint smile that appeared just when he thought no one was watching. There was no denying it. They were both aware of the magnetic pull that now existed between them. Derek tried to bury his desire beneath the layers of work, scanning reports, answering emails, and attending meetings, but each tick of the clock only heightened the tension inside him. He could feel her presence even when she wasn't in the room, a phantom touch lingering at the edges of his consciousness. By mid-afternoon, he had no choice but to seek her out, to confront the fire that had been lit and refused to be ignored. He found Emily alone in the conference room, reviewing a presentation she would soon deliver. The soft hum of the overhead lights and the faint tapping of her pen created a quiet intimacy that made his pulse race. "Emily," he said, his voice low, controlled yet betraying the intensity he felt, "we need to talk. I can't ignore this anymore." She looked up slowly, her eyes locking with his, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and challenge. "You mean last night?" she asked, her voice soft but loaded with meaning. Derek nodded. "Yes, last night. What happened, what it meant, I need to understand it fully. And I can't do that without you." Emily's lips curved into a subtle, enigmatic smile. "You're serious," she said. Derek stepped closer. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he admitted, his chest tightening as he watched her reaction. She rose from her chair and moved toward him, each step deliberate, drawing the tension between them to a palpable peak. "Then I suppose it's time you remember everything," she said softly. "But remember, Derek, once memories are recalled, there's no going back." His breath caught, his pulse accelerating. "I'm ready," he whispered. Emily reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, her touch electrifying in its simplicity. "Last night," she began, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "started in the quiet of the office. You were stressed, overwhelmed, and yet, playful in a way that caught me off guard. You leaned over the desk, hands brushing, eyes locking, and in that moment, you were completely unguarded." Derek closed his eyes, letting her words guide his memory. He could almost feel the brush of her fingers, the subtle heat radiating between them. "And then?" he asked, his voice tense, almost desperate. "And then," Emily continued, "you kissed me. Boldly, recklessly, without hesitation. And I kissed back. The world around us disappeared. It was just us, two people who had been holding back for too long, finally letting go." She stepped closer, so that the space between them was charged, almost unbearable. "We moved with a reckless abandon neither of us expected, laughter mixing with whispers, touches that should have been forbidden. But felt inevitable." Derek's hands trembled slightly. The memory, the reality of it, was overwhelming. "And the lipstick?" he asked, his voice low. Emily's eyes sparkled with a teasing glint. "That was a mark," she admitted. "A reminder of everything that happened in that brief, stolen night. Not shameful, not secretive, just ours. Something tangible to hold onto when reality threatened to take it away." Derek exhaled slowly, the weight of desire and adrenaline coiling within him. "Emily, I don't know how to handle this," he confessed, his honesty rare and raw. "You don't need to handle it," she said, her voice soft, almost comforting, yet still charged with challenge. "You need to embrace it. Let yourself feel it, live it, experience it fully. And I promise, Derek, you won't regret it." For the first time in years, Derek allowed himself to let go, not of control, but of the fear that had always kept him distant, aloof, untouchable. Emily had awakened something inside him, something raw and undeniable. He felt the pull of her presence, the intensity of their connection, and he realized that trying to resist it was pointless. I want this," he said, voice firm now, full of conviction. "I want every memory, every touch, every moment with you. I don't care about the risks, the consequences, nothing matters except us, here and now." Emily's lips curved into a small, victorious smile. "Good," she whispered, moving so close that their bodies nearly touched. "Because last night was only the beginning. What comes next will change everything." The tension between them was almost unbearable, every heartbeat echoing in the silent room. Derek could feel the intensity of desire, of unspoken longing, building to a fever pitch. He realized then that Emily wasn't just a colleague, an intern, or a fleeting distraction. She was the catalyst, the force that had broken through his carefully constructed walls and demanded to be felt, experienced, and understood. "Are you ready for that?" she asked softly, her breath warm against his cheek. Derek swallowed hard, the gravity of the moment settling over him. "I'm ready," he said, and for the first time, he felt completely alive, vulnerable, and exhilarated all at once. They stood there, the office dimly lit around them, the city outside a distant, glittering backdrop. Last night had been a spark, a fleeting blaze of passion and vulnerability. But now, standing inches apart, Derek knew that what they shared was far more than a single night. It was the beginning of something intense, consuming, and impossible to ignore. And deep inside, he knew one undeniable truth: nothing would ever be the same again. Last night had changed everything, and tonight would only escalate the fire that had already begun. The following evening, Derek found himself standing outside the office building long after the lights had dimmed. The city was quiet, but his thoughts were anything but. Last night's recollection, pieced together from Emily's careful words and teasing confessions, left him restless, craving clarity and closure, without fully understanding what he was chasing. He knew one thing: whatever had begun between them was far from simple. It wasn't just desire. It was an awakening he couldn't ignore, a challenge to everything he had ever believed about control, professionalism, and the boundaries he had meticulously maintained. Emily's voice echoed in his mind, each word stirring a mix of longing, anticipation, and something sharper, fear of the unknown. She had warned him once, twice, perhaps a dozen times, that some memories were dangerous, that the moments they had shared weren't merely playful but transformative. Derek had never been the type to follow a warning like that, and yet, in the quiet of the night, he realized that part of him wanted to be led. When he finally returned to the office, the building was nearly empty, the echo of his footsteps amplified by the polished floors. He found Emily sitting at a desk tucked into the far corner of the executive suite, her posture calm, composed, but every subtle movement radiating tension. She looked up as he approached, a faint smile curling her lips. Derek felt his pulse quicken. The sight of her, so poised yet intimate, was enough to make him forget every professional concern he had carried in. "You're still thinking about last night," she said softly, her voice low, teasing, but layered with something heavier. Derek nodded, unable to deny it. "I can't stop," he admitted. "I need to understand everything, Emily. Not just the kiss or the laughter, but why it felt like it changed everything between us." Emily set aside the documents she had been reviewing and leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving his. "You want the truth?" she asked. Derek stepped closer. "Yes," he said firmly. "I want all of it. Every memory, every feeling, every part of what happened that night." She studied him for a long moment, the dim light of the office casting shadows across her face, highlighting the intensity in her gaze. "Very well," she said, finally. "But once you remember, there's no turning back. The night was reckless, thrilling, dangerous. Are you ready to face that?" Derek's chest tightened, but he nodded. "I'm ready," he whispered. Emily's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. She rose from her chair and moved toward him, her steps deliberate, measured, creating a tension that made his heart hammer. "Last night began innocently," she said softly, with laughter and subtle touches. "You were frustrated with work, yet playful. You leaned over my desk, hand brushing mine, and our eyes met in a way that said something. Something neither of us had admitted before." Derek closed his eyes, letting the memory, or the reconstruction of it, wash over him. He could almost feel the warmth of her hand against his, the soft brush of her hair against his cheek, the rapid heartbeat that matched his own. "And then," Emily continued, her voice lower, more intimate, "you kissed me. Boldly, recklessly, with a confidence that startled me, but also thrilled me. We kissed again and again, the world around us disappearing. It was electric, inevitable, and we both knew it." Derek's hands trembled slightly, the intensity of her words making his body ache with anticipation. "And the lipstick?" he asked, his voice tense. Emily's eyes glinted, teasing and mischievous. "A mark," she admitted. "A reminder, not just for you, but for me as well. Something tangible to hold onto when the moments themselves feel fleeting." It wasn't about shame or secrecy, it was about capturing the passion, the vulnerability, the danger of that night. Derek's pulse raced. The memory, or what she was revealing, was consuming him, leaving him both exhilarated and unnervingly exposed. "Emily," he said softly, "I can't stop thinking about it. About you. About us. Last night, it was more than just a mistake. It felt like something I've been missing my whole life." Emily's expression softened, a vulnerability creeping into her eyes. "And that's why it matters," she said gently. "Because it was real. Because we allowed ourselves to be seen." Not just as colleagues, but as people, as something more. And you, Derek, for the first time, weren't afraid to be yourself. Vulnerable, reckless, alive. Her words struck him deeply. Vulnerable, alive. He had spent years building walls, controlling every aspect of his life, never letting anyone, or himself, see the raw intensity of his emotions. And yet, here she was, unraveling those carefully constructed defenses with nothing more than words, a glance, and the memory of a kiss. Derek stepped closer, the heat of anticipation and desire coiling within him like a live wire. Emily, I don't want this to stop, he whispered, his voice low but urgent. I want every moment, every feeling, every memory, with you. I want to explore it, no matter what it takes. Emily's lips curved into a small, victorious smile. Good, she said, her voice soft, intimate. Because last night was just the beginning. What we share now, it will change everything. And it won't be easy. But it will be worth it. The tension between them became almost unbearable. The office, once sterile and professional, now felt charged with electricity. Every glance, every subtle movement, carried weight and meaning. Derek felt the intensity of their connection like a physical force, pulling him closer, challenging him to surrender to the unspoken desire, the unacknowledged passion that had been ignited between them. Are you ready for that? Emily asked again, her voice a whisper, her presence magnetic. Derek's throat tightened, but his answer was clear. I am, he said firmly. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. And in that charged, silent moment, Derek realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Last night had been a spark, part 6 had been a flame, and now, standing inches apart, he understood that the fire they had ignited would consume them both, dangerously, passionately, and irrevocably. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. Emily had awakened something in him, something fierce and unrelenting. And deep inside, he knew that every choice, every step, every stolen moment with her would be worth it. Because last night had changed everything, and now, together, they were about to discover just how far that change would go. The office was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights outside the windows. Derek sat at his desk, hands clasped tightly together, mind racing. Last night had finally crystallized in his memory, the stolen kisses, the laughter, the reckless abandon, the brush of Emily's hand against his. Every fragment of that night pulsed through him like a live wire, electrifying and impossible to ignore. He realized with a clarity that startled him that nothing in his life had ever mattered as much as the connection he now shared with her. Emily entered the office silently, her presence instantly commanding his attention. She looked serene, composed, yet there was a tension in her movements, a quiet intensity in her eyes that told him she felt the same fire consuming him. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, charged with the anticipation of everything they had begun but not yet fully explored. You remembered, she said softly, almost in awe, as she stepped closer. I did, Derek admitted, his voice low, full of conviction. Every moment, every touch, every look. I remember it all now. And I can't stop thinking about it, or you. Emily's lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. Good, she whispered, because I couldn't either. Last night, it changed everything. And now, it's not just a memory. It's real, right here, right now. Derek felt a rush of adrenaline, the heat of desire and longing coursing through him. He rose from his chair and closed the distance between them. Every step felt deliberate, charged, inevitable. He could see the subtle tremor in her hands, the soft rise and fall of her chest, and the intensity of her gaze. She was no longer just his intern, no longer just the woman who had left a mark on his collar. She was something far more dangerous, far more intoxicating, the embodiment of desire and vulnerability intertwined. I can't ignore this anymore, Derek said, his voice taut with emotion. I want everything with you. No hesitation, no holding back. Whatever it takes, Emily, I want it. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, vulnerability crept through the controlled poise she always maintained. Derek, she whispered, you have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that. But are you prepared for what comes next? Because once we step beyond this, there's no turning back. I am, he said firmly, determination etched into every line of his face. I've never been more certain of anything. Emily stepped even closer, until the space between them was almost non-existent. Their breaths mingled in the charged silence of the room. Then, in a moment that felt both timeless and urgent, Derek reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. Their eyes locked, and the world outside the office faded entirely. The kiss that followed was different from last night, slower, more deliberate, filled with the awareness of what they had shared and what they were about to explore. It was a kiss that held all the desire, longing, and vulnerability that had been building between them, and it left them both breathless, hearts pounding in perfect synchrony. Pulling back slightly, Derek rested his forehead against hers. "Emily, this is just the beginning," he whispered. She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I know," she replied softly. "And I'm ready." "Are you?" "I am," he said again, and this time, there was no hesitation. The hours that followed were a delicate dance of discovery. They explored the boundaries of their connection, learning the rhythms, the gestures, the unspoken language that had developed between them. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word carried meaning far beyond the physical. It was the embodiment of trust, desire, and a bond that neither of them had anticipated but both had craved. As the night deepened, they found themselves in the quiet sanctuary of Derek's office, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor. There was no rush, no need for hasty gestures, only the intimacy of shared presence, the thrill of understanding each other in ways that went beyond words. Derek realized that the passion they had ignited wasn't just about attraction, it was about connection, about vulnerability, about the willingness to step into the unknown together. Emily rested her head against his chest, her fingers entwined with his. "Derek," she murmured, her voice barely audible, this feels like more than a night, more than a kiss. It feels like destiny." Derek's heart swelled, the enormity of her words settling over him. "It does," he whispered, holding her closer. "And I promise, I won't let it fade. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together." For the first time in years, Derek felt complete. The control he had so tightly maintained over his life no longer mattered. The walls he had built around his heart had crumbled, replaced by a bond that was intense, vulnerable, and irrevocable. Emily had changed everything, not just with a kiss, a laugh, or a stolen moment, but by showing him what it meant to let go, to trust, to feel fully and without reservation. Hours passed in a haze of whispered confessions, laughter, and shared silence. The city outside continued its endless rhythm, but inside that office, time seemed to stretch, bend, and fold around them. They were no longer just colleagues, no longer just a CEO and an intern. They were two people who had discovered each other, fully, without pretense, without boundaries, and without fear. As dawn approached, casting a soft glow through the office windows, Derek held Emily tightly, the warmth of her body against his solidifying the reality he had fought to deny. "Emily," he whispered, "last night, tonight, it's changed everything. And I don't ever want to go back to the way things were." "I don't either," she murmured, resting her head on his chest, a soft smile playing on her lips. "And we won't. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. No regrets, no doubts, just us." And in that quiet, golden light, Derek realized that she was right. Last night had been a spark, the following nights had been flames, and now, together, they were a fire that could not be extinguished. The lipstick on his collar was no longer just a mark. It was a symbol, a tangible reminder of the moment everything had changed, and of the love, passion, and connection that would continue to grow between them. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Derek knew one thing with perfect certainty. Emily had not only altered the course of one night, one moment, she had changed the trajectory of his life forever. And he was ready to embrace every challenge, every thrill, and every passion that their future would bring. Because last night had changed everything, and together, they would never look back.